The NBA draft will be taking place on June 23rd, which is a little more than 2 weeks away at the time of this recording, and I know I am well behind on this. I've had so many people asking for some draft prospect videos, and I've said this for a while now. I'm pretty bad when it comes to assessing draft prospects, especially when the Bulls aren't rebuilding and don't have high lottery picks on their docket. It makes the draft not as exciting as a Bulls fan, for me at least. I'm sure that's not the case for all Bulls fans, but for me, I'm more focused on what moves can be made to help this team win now, rather than project players going in the mid-first round that can be intriguing for the future, but are not pieces that are going to be helping this team win in the immediate term. But all of that being said, because with the draft coming up in 2 weeks, what would a Bulls channel be without discussing some of the potential prospects that the Bulls could select at number 18? And there have been a lot of names that are floating around that are slated to go in that 15 to 20 range, some of which have already held workouts with the Bulls. And one player that worked out with the Bulls recently that I have seen so many people talking about and asking me questions about. I've had countless people send me messages or left me comments on my videos on why I haven't talked about this guy. And that is none other than Kai Sotto, the Filipino professional basketball player that is slated to go in the late first round, early second rounds. So that's where we're going to start in discussing NBA draft prospects for the Bulls and what we'll be going over in this video. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, ever since the Bulls held a workout with Kai Sotto, and I really hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but I am not positive on that. But ever since they held a workout with him last week, I've had countless people ask me about this kid, and I've seen his name get thrown around NBA Twitter. I even saw Sam Smith write about him. And so I asked myself, who is this guy and why is he being talked about so much in the NBA world? And right away, when I saw that he's Filipino, it made sense to me, given that there's such a large Filipino population that follows the NBA. I have a lot of viewers on my channel that live in the Philippines, which big shout out to those who tune in from that area. The Philippines are by far and away my second largest audience behind the United States. If any of you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe if you enjoy the content. You can also follow me on Twitter at BullsCentralYT. Even though you may not necessarily like what I have to say about Kai Sotto in this video, but anyway, so when I saw that, it made sense to me why there were so many headlines around this guy. But I wanted to know, just how good is this player? Is he really the type of player that can become something special in the NBA? And if he's working out with the Bulls and could potentially be a Bulls draft selection, what specifically can he bring to the Chicago Bulls? So a little background, Kai Sotto was a standout player in high school playing in the Philippines, and he actually left after his third year to come play high school basketball in the US to get more attention from scouts and college recruits. He is a 7'2", 232-pound big man with a massive wingspan. He currently plays professional basketball in Australia for the Adelaide 36ers and was actually voted the league's fans MVP, which I'm pretty sure doesn't mean much since he wasn't the actual league MVP, but more so just a fan favorite. Before joining the 36ers, though, he actually signed with the G League Ignite despite getting considerable interest from recruiters for NCAA Division I schools. But after signing with the G League, that made him ineligible to play in the NCAA. He was actually a 4-star recruit, pretty surprised that he chose to pass on playing in college, but to an extent, I get it. You know, some players want to sign and start getting paid as soon as they finish high school. I just feel like you have more exposure at the NBA scouting level when you're playing Division I level basketball. But be that as it may, he signed a contract with the Adelaide 36ers to play in Australia. Now, in the 23 games he played in the NBL, nothing too eye-popping. The guy averaged 7.5 points per game and 4.5 rebounds, playing a little over 15 minutes per game, averaging less than a block per game. Not the best numbers you want to see in a pretty inferior professional basketball league for a guy who is 7'2", 7'3". Again, I know he's only 20 years old and he's a project player. He's not going to be NBA ready, but what is noteworthy about Sotto is that he actually has a decent jump shot. He can even shoot it from distance for a guy his size, and also just not being the most agile player, you don't really see that all too often to be able to have a jump shot like he does. But look, here's the thing. If you actually watch game footage, highlight reels, mixtapes of this kid, sure, there are aspects about his game that are intriguing, but I'll be honest, he doesn't even look remotely close to being NBA ready yet. Like, even Marko Simonovic looked more NBA ready in his highlights playing in Serbia before he was drafted by the Bulls. And to this day, Simonovic still hasn't shown any signs of being ready to play at the NBA level. A great G League player, one of the better players on the Windy City Bulls, but there is a reason he hasn't played meaningful minutes in the NBA, especially on a Bulls team that actually needed a big man this past season. Like even when Nikola Vucevic was out for a period of time due to COVID and all the Bulls had was Tony Bradley, they opted to play guys like Derrick Jones Jr. at the small ball 5. They chose a 6'5 player to play center over Simonovic, unless it was garbage time, of course. Not saying that Sotto is going to be like Simonovic because every player develops differently at different speeds, but there is something to be said of the fact that Marco looked more NBA ready and was more agile with better footwork and was a better shooter from deep, and he was a second-round pick. Like, I get the excitement here. He's a massive guy with shooting ability, he's young, some upside potential, and the Bulls need a big man. But at the same time, based on where the Bulls are at right now, what's available between free agency options, trades, you'd have to think there are better options at this point. I'll admit, it is a little odd that the Bulls had Sotto work out for them when really he's projected to be more of a second-round prospect. He's not even listed on some NBA mock draft boards, so I just find it really hard to believe that the Bulls would even consider selecting him at 18 unless there is just something about this kid that is flying under the radar and some untapped potential that other teams are not seeing. Because the same can be said about Patrick Williams. Different scenario, obviously, in terms of the prospect, but the Bulls really had their eye on Patrick when just a few weeks leading up to the draft, most mock drafts didn't even have Patrick being a lottery pick. He was slated to be a mid-first rounder. The guy came off the bench in his freshman year of college, but AK saw something in him and went aggressive with what most people saw as a reach, taking him number 4 overall. Maybe there is something similar in how they are viewing Kai Sotto. Now, I think the biggest thing about Sotto that gives me pause is really assessing whether this is the right player for the Bulls, and not only taking him at number 18, and that being a huge stretch based on what we know of his abilities and the best players available at the center position in the draft, but it's the fact that you're talking about another center, another big, that isn't that gifted defensively. Like we've been saying all season, all offseason anyway, and even throughout the past season, the Bulls must prioritize front court defense. The lack of interior defense rim protection absolutely killed the Bulls, especially down the stretch, with their inability to crash the glass, giving up too many second chance points, their inability to defend the pick and roll, and they were one of the worst shot blocking teams in the league last season, bottom 5 in fact. And the thing about drafting a guy like Sotto, that doesn't really solve your big man problem, because it's one thing to just add a big man to the roster because you don't have any bigs, but it's more about adding the right bigs for this team. And Kai Sotto, again, based on my very superficial knowledge of him as a prospect after doing some research on this guy when everyone was talking about him, but based on what I've seen, both in the highlights as well as looking at his high school and professional numbers, he's not mobile enough to be a strong rim protecting defender in the NBA. I don't care that he's 7'2 or 7'3. When you don't have the footwork and the physicality and the strength to defend the paint, it doesn't mean anything in this league, or I guess I should say for the Bulls, because that's what they really need. Because again, the focus and priority for this offseason should be centered around adding size, but size and depth that will give you the energy and defensive tenacity needed to go with a perimeter defense from Lonzo and Alex Caruso. And based on where the Bulls stand right now, again, knowing that this isn't a team that is rebuilding and has time to work and develop project players for 5+ years, you have to be focusing on players that are going to help this team win now. Guys that I've talked about in some of my prior videos as free agent targets or trade targets, guys like Mitchell Robinson, Mo Bamba, Montrezl Harrell, even a Bobby Portis. I'm not saying these are all-star level caliber players that are game changers for the Bulls, but they're certainly going to be impact players in the immediate term versus a project rookie. Of course, whoever they pick at number 18 in theory is going to be a quote-unquote project. Like, it's very rare that a rookie selected 18th overall is going to be NBA ready and provide an instant impact in their first season. Again, it's even possible the Bulls might trade that pick after they make the selection just to get a more established player in a trade package. But even if they don't trade the pick, you'd have to think they're going to take the best player available and not focus as much on fit and figure out what to do with that player at a later time, whether it be incorporating them into the roster, developing them for the future, or trade them for another win now asset to a team that is looking to rebuild by adding younger players. And if they do look to draft the best player available, I can't see that being Kai Sotto based on where he's projected to be selected and just looking at all the talented prospects he's competing with. Most draft boards don't even have Sotto as a top 10 prospect at his position. And we look at the talent of guys like a Mark Williams, a Walker Kessler, a Jalen Williams, even an EJ Liddell, among others who are projected to go in the mid-first round. I just don't see the Bulls passing over players of this talent level for Kai Sotto, a player that would be a big risk drafting that high. I just think the risk reward there isn't in favor for the Bulls. Now the question is, well, why would the Bulls even have him work out for this team if they weren't at least considering drafting him? Like, if you're not even looking to draft this kid with the 18th pick, why would you not just focus on other players that are legitimate prospects for that pick? Well, it's possible, and I have absolutely no insider knowledge on this, nor have I even seen it mentioned or rumored anywhere, but it's really the only way that I can rationalize this. It's possible the Bulls are looking to trade down in the draft, say to the second round, to get another asset in return, because we know the Bulls are looking to win now. You're looking to get pieces that are more established, players that you know more or less what to expect from them playing at an NBA level, because for all of these players entering the draft, you have no idea how they're going to show up at the NBA level. It's possible the Bulls would look to trade that 18th pick after the selection for another player and a second round pick to then potentially draft Kai Sotto in the second round. Probably still unlikely, but it's really the only thing I can think of for why the Bulls would have him work out for this team. He's really just not that good enough to be drafted that high based on what we know of him right now. I am very curious to hear what you guys think, though. Maybe you've done more research on Kai Sotto than I have and can call out some things that I'm overlooking. Let me know in the comments. Until then, guys, as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.